Okay. Okay. I think we're recording.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I think we are absolutely, like you said, I think we're on the same page, and I think we have the same mission. And getting the word out about the two sides of the brain. It's been out, and then it's sort of like it didn't catch for some reason. And I think it's ready to make a comeback. And I think your work, I think your new book, I think it's really going to do some, it's going to get the word around to the people who need it.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that I look at the research of the split brain studies, and there's no question that there was a wealth of knowledge obtained. And why though? And I understand it went extreme, it's right brain this, left brain that, and somebody had to, put the fire out because the fire was on fire, and it was big, and I understand that, but there were pearls of wisdom gained from that work. And a good friend of mine, Jerry Jessup, is brilliant. He was a brilliant surgeon. Now he's retired, but he's all about the brain as well, and right brain, left brain. And it really seemed as though because there was no easy explanation about what they had gained, then they didn't know how to grow it. And it was growing the wrong way. So it's kind of like the wrong things were growing in the garden. And so they had to squash the whole garden and kill the whole garden. And then the work of Frederick Schiffer. Are you familiar with Of Two Minds?
It's an excellent work. I think that's another one that sort of fell through. I don't know why that didn't become more popular. When I read that, it was one of those aha moments where I thought, the first thing I did is get the goggles and I experimented.
Exactly. And they're fun. And they're fun and they're interesting. And most people I know of who use the goggles, and just so the audience understands, Frederick Schiffer he was a psychiatrist. I think he's still there at Harvard Department of Psychiatry. And he would have students, which you care about, and of course I care about, who would come in to Harvard perfectly healthy, perfectly excited, perfectly ready. And then halfway through a semester would crash out with some form of anxiety and psychosis. And so Dr. Schiffer devised a tool that could access using the temporal region of the visual field to activate the opposite hemisphere. And by doing so, could independently isolate, relatively speaking. Of course, we're never isolated. Both hemispheres are always functioning all the time, but could isolate the character profile of each of those hemispheres. And I remember, I think he came out like 01, and my book came out in 06. And his book really got squashed by mainstream neuroscience. And I thought, well, neuroscience for some reason is really wanting to not have this conversation. And I slipped under their radar because nobody was expecting me to come up with this My Stroke of Insight book that really added fuel to the conversation about the two hemispheres. And so nobody could squash My Stroke of Insight. People were too fascinated. A brain scientist at Harvard has a hemorrhage, wipes out half a hemisphere, learns about what's going on in the other one, and then recovers. I mean, it was a great story. So they couldn't squash it. And now, so that's why one reason, and that's even 12, 13 years later, you're in the conversation. Ian McGilchrist is in the conversation. And yes, his book, The Master and His Emissary, a beautiful collection of what have we learned really since the 1950s, 1960s in brain research about these two different ways of perceiving. And this has just been a conversation that we're desperate to have, because it's like, how do we access our internal peace when we are skewing ourselves all the way off to the left discontent value structure that no one can ever achieve real peace?
Well, I think one of the sayings you have in your book, I really like. It's simple and it's so true, the we inside me. And I think that's one of the things that culture has a real difficult time. That's what I sort of touch on in my book with. We really want there to be a solid, consistent self. And then when you say, well, there's a we, not an I, that there's a multiplicity going on, I think that shakes the reality of many people. And so I think that's one of the reasons why the Schiffer's work gets, I think that's why it didn't pick up. And that's why I think a lot of the left-right brain stuff, I mean, at the simplest level, there's at least two of us up there.
Right.
And I think the way you put it, there's really four. But it's just this idea that there's a multiplicity, there's a we inside me. And I think that's, it's a tough one to kind of crack. I think like your character one, I think that's the one that wants to really hold on to the idea that like, I'm the CEO, and I'm the only one in charge, and there's only a one upstairs,
I am the boss. Listen to me. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I love the exercise that you do with your students where you have them pay attention throughout their day. Who's the me at work? Who's the me at play? Who's the me who's hungry? Who's the me on the tennis court? Who are those me throughout the day? And what do they feel like? And so we know when we become, to me, there's just, the myths that I think it was really important to bust some of these myths. We only use 10% of the brain. No, if it's alive and it's in your head, you're using it. That was a comment made in like 1907. Hundreds of years ago, long before we knew anything about, the anatomy of the brain at this level. So, brain cells, if it's alive and it's in your head, you're using it. And then the other real myth is that the left brain is the rational thinking brain. Yes, it is. The left thinking tissue, but that it also has emotion, so that the right brain is not all of the emotion. There is the emotion of me, the individual, and there is emotion. I emote in the present moment. So we're hungry for peace. We're hungry for finding a way into our own selves. But you're right, that character one wants to say, no, there is one, and it is me, it is I, and the rest of us don't matter. And it's like, well, how's that working for us? It's not working real well for any of us.
And character one has the command of language, and that gives it such an edge. And
it's loud. We can hear it, but I think most of us are cognizant that our gut talks to us. That just doesn't feel right. Many of us are familiar with our intuition. And yet we are brought up in a society that is designed to not trust our intuition. A beautiful book. That's my little puppy barking. My character one would be throwing her out of the room right now. And the rest of me are thinking, I like my puppy here. She can speak. She has an opinion. But the Gift of Fear, Gavin de Becker. Are you familiar with that book?
No, I'm not actually.
You will want to look into that book. It was out in, I'm going to say that the late 80s, maybe the early 90s, but it's called The Gift of Fear. And Gavin de Becker was brought up in an environment that was unsafe. And so he had no choice but to develop his intuition and to know, well, under these circumstances, I need to hide or get the hell out because I'm in danger. And so it's really, and then he grew up to create a company that is threat assessment. And so he does threat assessment for movie stars and people who get all kinds of mail. And, you know, is this person a threat, or what degree of threat are they? Interesting character, beautiful book. I encourage you to look at that. But it's really about right brain. It's about how do we use our right brain to determine our level of safety in the world, and how do we trust this part of our information processing. So I'm thrilled to find you because you know, the team, we need a team of people who really are willing to go out into the world now and really speak about our different ways of being, and getting to know who inside of our head is making decisions. And I love Ian McGilchrist. He came to my home with a team when they were doing part of their documentary on the divided brain. And we disagree on well, he comes in really as a very strong character one. He is a very strong character one. And it's a beautiful book, and it's detail, more details about the details. But thank goodness somebody did that, right? I'm just so grateful that he did that. But what I bring to the conversation is, well, these are character profiles. I am a very different person when I'm in my character one, which is the left thinking part of my brain, as to when I'm in my character three, which is my right here, right now, experiential part of myself that doesn't have a me identity. And so I'm excited because I think it's time that we really allowed all the information that we can learn about the brain. The brain's not black and white. Our experience as humans is not black and white. Our experience as humans is as character profiles. So isn't it lovely to actually put that on top of some anatomy inside of the brain, get to know the four characters, bring some of our unconscious, or you used a different, did you say non-conscious? Was that a word that you used?
Actually, I was considering the processes of the right brain actually quite conscious, just not conscious from the viewpoint of like what you would say character one. From character one's viewpoint, they're unconscious. But when you're actually, like, say, doing yoga or you're playing guitar, they're very conscious states. They're just not the kind of thing we can put into words.
Exactly.
That's been the big bias in the human experience. If we can't put it into words, we don't value it.
Right.
And the more we come to value character three, character four, who may not be able to speak, but that doesn't mean that their experiences are not conscious, and it doesn't mean that their experiences are not highly valuable, not just to us as an individual, but they're so valuable to us as a species, a collective.
Yes.
And like you said, what's funny, you mentioned Ian as being a character one, because when I was going through naming my characters, Ian came up as who I was going to name as my character one. so I think that's it. But when you know, this whole idea of everything being so black and white, that's another trait of character one. And since we're so dominated by character one, we just really think it's like it's either true or it's false. And the thing I love about right brain consciousness is it sees the connection. So on the surface, everything seems like it's opposites, but right brain awareness just seems to connect everything. And so there's all shades of gray. So over here on the left, we've got black and white, and on the right, we've got just an infinite shades of gray.
Yes. And isn't it lovely? Isn't it lovely that we have these two different ways of being? You know, my dog doesn't have language, but she's talking to us and she is communicating. And somewhere, yes, we're talking about you. And somewhere along the line, yes, you have a lot to say about it. Somewhere along the line, science decided that thinking and language are synonymous. They're one thing, and they're not one thing. Thinking is a form of language. Let me go the other way. Language is a form of thinking, but we think in other ways. We can think, we think in the present moment. We experientially, that is still a form of thinking. And it was always very interesting to me after the stroke that people, and I'm going to say people, and I really mean neurologists over the age of 50 at the time, male, non-US, I'm going to be very specific, said that, they had no use for me. Their only use for me was I was brain damaged. And it didn't matter that I had recovered completely all of my language, all of my abilities. To them, I was brain damaged. And so I had no use. And it was like, hello, talk about the hardcore black and white. And I wasn't brain damaged. I had a group of cells in my brain that had a trauma. The other cells in my brain were just fine. But because it was language that was wiped out, and language was thoroughly wiped out, I had complete silence. There was, it was a magnificently interesting experience. It was like pushing the mute button on my brain, and it was silent. But in the absence of the distraction of language and the language circuitry, what I gained was the overall non-inhibited filtering of the experience of the present moment, which was a blissful euphoria. Of course, why isn't it? Without the judgment of a neuron that comes in and says it's not perfect. It is what it is. It's perfection at its finest. Life is life. And then the neurons turn on. And so one thing that I really appreciated about your book was in the speaking of different levels of consciousness. Who are we? Who is the I behind the I? And if it's not me, the ego, who has the power to observe and to experience? Who is that observer when it's not the interpreter? Character one language. And for me, there is the consciousness of all that is, that where I'm not taken into account. And if it's not about me and all the filtering of the left brain around the filter of me and how I feel about it and what I think about it, in the absence of that, what is simply is, and it's magnificent. And oh my gosh, the gratitude of my right brain that says I'm alive. I'm alive. I mean, look at this. This is a conglomerate. I'm not a single-celled organism. I'm a single-celled organism that multiply that 50 trillion times and differentiate so that I have different types of cells and different systems and different abilities. And it's like, I mean, this is a mind-blowing experiment of the universe that we exist at all. Right. And so that part of my brain that connects to the innocence of what simply is, and that I'm a biological creature capable of digitary movement, so I can manipulate space, and I have legs that allow me mobility, and I have eyes that see, and I have a language, a group of cells that can create sound and communicate with another human who can do the same thing. I mean, the phenomenon of what we are is outrageously impossible. So how can I not experience myself with this incredible awe and sense of gratitude? Well, that's a consciousness. That's still an awareness of my existence, but it's not all about me, me, me. And in the absence of the me, me, me portion of my brain, thank goodness I have it. It's fantastic. It allows me to remember my name and where I live and what I need and all the details of the external world. But still, in the absence of that, I'm still a conscious entity, conscious and aware. I'm just not focused on all the things that group of cells is focused on, because I have that group of cells to do that. So just these multiple layers of consciousness. And my character one, that rational left brain thinking, as you mentioned in your book, it's always in search of the next, of the next, of the more, of the next. It's never satisfied, because it's always by design trying to get more. Well, there's no satisfaction in more. There's no peace in always wanting more. It's like, when do we actually just calm down, look at ourselves, say, wow, oh my God, I'm alive, and appreciate the existence of self in the present moment? And that is always a choice.
I like the way that you put that too, that it really, and to a lot of people, I think that's the most difficult. I've already gotten questions. People ask me all the time about free will, because I put it the same way you do, in the sense that we always have this choice. So there's this judgmental, categorical part of our brain, and it is exactly that. It always desires the next moment. And as soon as that, but we're choosing that. And I know at the time when you really get caught up in it, it doesn't feel like you're choosing it. It feels like, sometimes it feels like you're stuck there.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of it has a momentum to it. And so, but when that judgment slows down just a little bit, all of a sudden you're swimming in the ocean of the mystic, and everything is absolutely perfect as it is. And you want to literally go screaming down the street, like, I'm a conscious being.
I know. Oh my God, I exist at all.
This to be aware is the most absolute magnificent gift. And then you get back into character one and you're like, oh, my coffee's cold. Or,
Exactly. Yuck. Right? No, it's coffee. Oh my God, you're even capable of knowing what it is and having it. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. As as a person, as a scientist who, because I think in terms of cells, I think in terms of brain cells, I think in terms of brain circuitry, I think as we're wired, I see that. That's what I taught. That's what I studied. That's what I cared about. What is the difference between the consciousness of a normal brain versus the brain of somebody with schizophrenia or OCD? What is panic and anxiety? But it's cells, everything boils down to the cells. We are cells. And if we have cells, every ability we have because we have cells that are able to perform that function. And then it's like, well, if I've got this big brain and I've got this character one left rational thinking part of myself, and I put all the value on that character's values, which is thinks hierarchically. It's all about me, the individual. I know where I stand on every ladder that there is, and it compares. It's comparing. It's looking for differences. It wants to get higher on that scale. Well, if that's my value structure, then okay, that's what I can relate to. But if I don't have Bella, she's very chatty today, and she's never chatty, so it's really interesting. Let me put her down. I'll be right back and have a second. Come here, Bella. You need to go down. Come here. You're gonna be a superstar right now. See, there's Bella. This is Bella. Hello. You gonna talk to everybody? No. Hello. She bites.
Oh.
She's a rescue and she bites. So I respect her. And, but anyway, so, if the different parts of the brain have different cells that have different skill sets, that have different values, then these are going to be parts of ourselves. We have choices. And to me, free will is knowing what my choices are. How many times has somebody said to us when we behave badly, you could have made a better choice, don't you think? And it's like, don't you think if I'd have thought that I had a better choice, I might have made that better choice? But if I'm all caught in one of my four characters, then all I know is the choice of that character. And each of these characters inside of our brain are powerful personalities. And when I'm unhappy, when I'm mad, when I'm raging, when I do that 1,000%, 100% thoroughly, right? I run that circuit. I am that. And then getting me out of that discontent is difficult, because that character now has the microphone, and she's going to chew on that bone as long as she's ready. And character one comes in as the boss, and gosh knows character one is the boss. And so the boss wants the microphone because we have to have order, or we don't resonate with that part of ourselves at all, because, that's mom's job. And so we're over here in the messy rooms and trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I live my existence with mom running my life so that I don't ever have to run my life, because mom does it so well and I don't want to, I'm distracted. So, really waking up to the idea that I have these four inside of me, at least. Now, I will say each of these characters can be divided up but that's a whole deeper story that I'm going into. But we have emotion in each hemisphere, emotion in the present moment, right here, right now, experiential. Oh my gosh. It's beautiful where I am. It's exciting. It's beautiful. The water's there. What's it feel like when I dive into the water and I feel the pressure against my skin? What's it feel like? What's the temperature feel like? And then I come out in the air and what's the temperature of the air? And I got the bugs that are singing a serenade to me. And I mean, it's the excitement of the present moment. What does it feel like? And then there's just this right thinking tissue that truly is in the consciousness of every cell of my body. It got directed when I was inside of the womb, and I started as that little zygote cell that multiplies and repackages its DNA and multiplies its DNA and repackages it to 50 trillion of me by the time I come out into the world. Well, those duplicate at a rate of 250,000 new cells per second. There's not a thought going on. There is a consciousness, a ball of energy motivating all of that division and differentiation to happen at the cellular level. And then boom, you got a newborn, and we all know what a newborn's like. They're like a big blob of energy, right? They have zero consciousness of connection to self and identification, because then it takes cells inside of the brain to define that inside of ourselves. So, we know so much more in differentiating the brain. It's easy to look at the body and say, okay, this is my finger and this is a cheek, those are different. Yeah. But what's actually different about those cells and those circuits inside of our brain? And wow, we're coming up with a roadmap for getting to know who we are. Who are we? Who are the we inside of me? And creating a healthy interplay and conversation and relationship between them. Wow, what a concept. Conscious human being.
Yeah. And I liked one of your quotes where you said something like, if you're going to suffer, at least enjoy it.
I don't mind if you're going to be miserable, as long as you remember to enjoy it. Yeah. We're capable of incredibly heart-wrenching grief, and grief is a beautiful, totally enveloping experience of pain. We're able to have grief because we're alive. Celebrate the fact that we're capable. It's so beautiful. The grief is as horrible as it may seem or appear as pain, but if we look at pain, any kind of pain, as simply a circuitry that is part of the difference between me being alive and me not being alive. These are the rich and delicious experiences of being human. Suffering is a experience. Are we the suffering? No. Are we able to suffer? Yes. And can we perceive suffering as something other than horrible? Yes.
And doesn't that change everything?
Changes everything.
Because I remember when I was so anxious in my 20s, continuous, overwhelming anxiety. And then I realized, it was my not wanting to be anxious that was my anxiety. The moment I welcomed my anxiety and had that appreciation, like you were talking about,
exactly,
another facet of human experience. And it has a certain, interesting feel to it. And as soon as I accepted it totally, it was gone. And that was my genuine aha moment, where I was like, I couldn't believe that by accepting,
yes,
by accepting these different brain states, instead of fighting them, it's the fighting them that gives them power.
Exactly.
And it energizes them. And then when the moment acceptance happens, it fades. And so I had an interesting experience over a couple weekends ago. I was going on a sub tour, so like a submarine, it's something from World War II. And so the hatch is open, and it's a very small hatch and tiny little thing to get in. And my character too went crazy and said, "You're not going down there."
Exactly.
And if I didn't have the awareness that this was simply some brain circuits that were simply firing from old misinformation, I might have listened to it.
Right.
And I did, but by having that recognition, this is just my brain, this is just a part of my brain going off. It's not accurate. It's making up a story. It thinks it's right. It's not, though. And it's perfectly safe.
Right.
And as soon as I recognized that, I sort of chuckled. I laughed to myself a little bit, and I thought, wasn't that funny, you know?
And it takes no time at all. I mean, and that's the thing, is that emotions, circuits want to run. And as soon as we stop them and say, no, I don't like that feeling. I don't want to be sad. I don't want to be mad. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be scared. I don't want to feel anxiety. It's like, okay, now we're going to stick ends on that circuit and say, it can't flow. And so what's it do? It stews, right? And it builds up, and then it's like, okay, well, now I'm going to throw alcohol on it, right? Because now I don't want to feel anxiety, so I'm going to drink some alcohol, or I'm going to take a drug, and I'm going to do something to distract me away. Well, that doesn't help that circuit any. It keeps it all capped up. So, circuits want to run. If I'm feeling anything, if I'm feeling anxiety, if I'm feeling fear, it's like, ooh, wow, that was a great one, the sympathetic nervous system is this amazing, bam, happens just like that. So powerful and so fast. And it's a physical thing inside of our body. For me, one of the biggest you'll appreciate this. One of the biggest aha moments from my whole training was the first time I saw in a cadaver the chain ganglia of the sympathetic nervous system passing down right along the bodies of those vertebrae. And to me, it was like, oh my gosh, I could conceptualize, because I feel it, boom, something happens at one end and it shoots through the whole body. And there it is. It's an anatomical structure capable of doing this. And it's just these blobs right along and this little chain going between. And was like, wow, those cells are so powerful that I can have this whole sympathetic alert awareness of push away, pay attention. To me, it's just this absolutely biological phenomenon.
Yeah.
But I agree. And from the moment we think a thought like, oh no, I'm not going in there, it's dangerous, it's not safe. From the moment you think that thought, it stimulates that fear response or that anxiety. And then you have the physiological flush through your bloodstream from the beginning of the first thought till the time your blood is clean takes less than 90 seconds. So that observer, the willingness to say, okay, my cells are freaking out. That's exciting. That's character 2. I feel my anxiety. My anxiety is real. Of course it's real. But it's also cells. And I can observe them and flush and let it flush completely out of my blood and then act. So this perception of self as not just me, the individual, the left brain, it's all about me. I'm the powerful human. I'm the powerful woman. I'm the powerful this, that, or the other. It's just, I'm a collection of cells. I'm this magnificent collection of cells. And I don't have to believe what my brain says to me. It's designed, and I loved what a good job you did in talking about how it's going to take whatever data it has and it's going to make a story. That's what it does. It's designed to do that so that we can feel safe in the world. And it can have, one concept, one idea, one piece of data, add another piece of data, and it starts the weave. And it can be completely wrong, but truly believe that it's right based on the information that it has. So, I'm always amused when people say, oh, so-and-so, they just changed their mind a lot. And it's like, well, I want to know that person because they're open-minded to the new information coming in. I don't want to create a construct upon which I build everything without any respect for the detail or the development of the story.
Yeah, kind of letting go of that need for consistency. I found that to be a huge part of my growth because that character 1 wants that consistency, and so many of us that are caught up in that character 1 want a consistent story, even if it's wrong. We would rather live a lie as long as it's consistent and be open to a truth that's difficult and multiplicity, and it's big and it's complex and it's 1,000-way interaction. Right. But that's the way reality is.
Right.
so much of
Yeah.
what you're saying, it sounds so much of the readings I've done in Zen, it's sometimes when you're talking, you sound like a Zen teacher because you have this kind of sense of like, I mean, they knew this almost
Yeah.
intuitively in Zen teachings, that if you accept an emotion, it takes its course, it runs its course, and then it's gone.
Right.
It's our
Yeah.
lack of acceptance of emotion that keeps it alive.
Yes, exactly. Because it wants your attention. It wants your attention. If there's something out there, if I feel fear and I just block the fear, it's like, no, fear is a lesson. Something stimulated the circuit that designed fear. And what is fear? Fear means wake up, become alert, alarm, alarm, alert, alert, pay attention. There's a danger or a potential hazard. Something has triggered that. So explore it. Don't block it. And I think that I listen to books on tape all the time, and I read all the time, and so I've rediscovered Agatha Christie, and Perot. I'm not French, is the guy, the detective. And one of the things that he says is, when you're creating a story, when you're looking for the answer, it's not about taking all the details and creating a storyline that fits most of the details. You have to create the story that fits most of the details, but what's most important are the details that don't fit, because they're the ones that are telling you that you have to change your story. The story's not right. So, and I love that, because it truly is going to be the power of the outliers that don't fit in, but it's the matter of just the brain. Character one wants to take those details and make that story, but now this comes in. Well, that has to be, that's a fluke. That's an outlier. So in that normal curve, we're going to throw it out, because so to me, all of science and the normal bell curve is all built on what fits the story, instead of looking at, well, what doesn't fit into the story. And as the scientific method, which I have all the respect in the world for what the scientific method can tell us, by definition, it is a method. So it will tell us things that fit into the method, but it's not going to explain the outliers. And to the left brain, the right brain is an outlier. So we cannot use the same techniques in order to, the same thinking that got us here isn't going to get us out of this, right? The same thinking of that left brain is not going to help us understand the thinking of the right brain, because it breaks all the rules. It's completely opposite in the way it processes information. And thank goodness, because if all we have are the details, and more details about those details, and we're routinizing, where's the big picture genius come in? And our genius comes in getting out of the details and looking at the bigger picture and saying, how might these different outliers shift our perspective of those details so that it incorporates the whole, not just the individual?
Seeing through who we think we are, letting go of that, and opening up to who we actually really are, really takes courage, because there's a certain safety in that story. It's familiar, and we've carried it, and culture encourages it. Culture encourages a simple story, and it helps me identify with my age, my gender, really my job, all these but that's all the normal story. But there's all these wonderful, blessed anomalies out there that when we start to notice them, and we're like, and then have the courage to really investigate it. And maybe that's a little more interesting. Maybe that's not something to ignore. Maybe that should be the focus.
Yeah.
And I notice when you start focusing on the anomalies, that's part of that hero's journey you talk about.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Jungian, and I really enjoyed that you put Jung in there, because I think the hero's journey is what, that's what we're going as human beings. when we make that
Yeah.
choice, the choice is to go on the journey or not. And
Yes.
we can live very simple lives, and we can suffer, and we can kind of get into the movie of our existence, and follow that along and live a okay life. And then some of us, we just go off to the hero's journey, and we say, I'm going to go into a place that's uncomfortable, unfamiliar, unknown, and dig the anomalies.
Right. Yeah.
Because there could be some really wonderful breadcrumbs that I've left to find my way home.
Yes. And isn't that kind of, I love that you're at a college, at a university. I'm still affiliated with the IU School of Medicine, but I've taken a different journey because now I'm doing the book thing. College to me is kind of that opportunity. Isn't that kind of the way our society is designed? And as a college teacher, when I was teaching, and I was teaching at the medical school, so most of those kids showed up, but I also taught kinesiology, and a lot of those kids, they didn't show up. And I believe I showed up 100%. And I tell them on day one, I'm showing up 100%. I'd like for you to show up 100%. That choice is yours. I will try to make it as interesting as absolutely possible, but ultimately I'm not inside of your head, and you're going to make your own decisions. So, and I will accept, because, this is part of your college experience. But what really bothered me as a professor was, the absence of I can't teach you if you don't show up. And I thought parents wanted kids to show up. And so I thought, well, isn't it too bad that I don't have the ability to communicate with my kids' parents before my kids' parents find out that their child didn't show up in my class, and so they ended up with a poor grade before they get the grade. Isn't it? But I spoke to several of my friends who were teachers, and they said, but this is part of the college experience. It's part of that exploration. And it's like, okay, I can accept that to a certain degree, but then also part of the exploration should allow kids to explore the anomalies. And if I'm a parent and I'm saying to my kids, okay, you're going to go to college and you're going to study business and you're going to do this and you're going to develop that left brain, and I want you to bring home decent grades, and I'm not performing that. Instead, I'm wandering, straying into alcohol in order to escape that dream of my parents. Well, kids need to know there are other options as well that are actually can be positive and explorative, and land them in a place that helps them find meaning. Because if I'm not finding meaning, and my parents want me to go to business school and do that, and so I'm escaping that with an alcohol or a drug in order to disconnect, then wouldn't it be better if there was an alternative path that these kids could take in exploring the possibility of our own nature, which is the hero's journey? And the hero's journey is essentially saying, I exist, I am me, I am Jill Bolte Taylor, these are blah, 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 the me. And how do I lay that down and explore a part of my consciousness that is greater than I? And I think that we all hear about let's say the right brain consciousness is the collection of the we have the I in the left brain, we have the we, but it's not a we, it's still a one. The consciousness of the right brain is not like you're there and I'm there and we're a bunch of drops making up an ocean. We dissolve back into becoming the ocean. We become the one again. And in that dissolving into the whole, we become all of it. And there is this knowing that exists. Does it know all the details of my life? No, it doesn't. Does it know all the details of your life? No. But you have that consciousnness inside of your head, and yet you also have that shared consciousness of the magnificence of the beauty and the celebration and the glory and the gratitude, there's a whole different knowledge base there that we can then tap into. We dissolve into that, we become that, and then we can pull our little drop back out and go back into being our left brain experience. But we then come into the experience of me, the left brain. I'm an individual capable of functioning in the external world with all the details of me that are also important to that left brain. But I come from the intention of the knowing of we are one collective whole. And if I truly know that you're my brother, then I'm not going to fight with you. I'm not going to compete with you. I'm not going to confront you. I'm going to experience and grow with you. And I'm going to support and I'm going to nurture and I'm going to aid you in every way that I can, because in aiding you, I'm aiding me as a part of this whole from which we all come. And it's a completely different value structure upon which we build the me, the individual, and how I behave in the external world. And in that comes, as you express in your book, meaning. And there's no meaning. I mean, there's details and there's facts and there's money and there's materialism and there's all that. But that's a whole different priority system and has a whole different meaning about the me, and mine, as opposed to the collective whole of humanity. And as I look at the condition of humanity, and this is one of the things I love about the college age, is I remember thinking, oh my gosh, we are inheriting a mess. The world is a mess. And yeah, we all want to go get drunk because the world's a mess. And this is what we're inheriting. It's not like we come in idealistically and we have these great ideas of how we want it all to be. And then we face reality. And it's like, and this was 40 years ago. So, now we've had 40 more years of the separation getting bigger and bigger. And the discontent, the lack of meaning, I mean, it's how do we find our way back to the whole? How do I touch that part of me that is sacred without freaking out my left brain with language that freaks it out, so it'll never bother to explore that part of me that is connected to all that is.
And if you get one, this is what I found this, and so I have another book coming out when it's all exercises. And that's what I like about your book. It's not something you read, it's actually something you work on. It's really a workbook. I think people get the most out of workbooks rather than just, reading detailed information that they're trying to memorize. And so I think when it comes to right brain processing, all you need to do is get one thing going. If you get one thing going, it's then other things. So maybe you start with music. So I just whimsic, this is just a intuitive based thing. I was lecturing and I said, let's just do an essay. What does music mean to me? And I know music's mostly a right brain process. And all of a sudden they started like opening up with these wonderful stories. I mean, I had one student who said I would marry music if I could. And and then all of a sudden it started to connect with the meaning of their life. They realized that so first I start with music, but then that connects with, what gives me meaning? And so many students touched on music giving them meaning to their life.
Yeah.
And that without music, they couldn't imagine life. And then you say, well, here we are in college and you're learning about all this stuff, and that's a useful tool and it's all really good. It's not bad, but it's not touching that, giving you the foundation, the meaning of why are you there? And once you got the meaning, then you can go memorize the details, and it makes perfect sense to you. And so I think it doesn't matter what type of right brain process you get going. It could be, then that leads to gratitude. And so it could be music and then gratitude, and then all of a sudden the meaning of your life, and it all, you open one door of the right brain, just one. And then all these other doors open. Right.
Yes. And it's, and I love that you use music. And one that I often will use is dance, because dance, dance is first of all, if you go to a space and music starts up, and you can tell the left brainer's dominant generally from the right brain dominant, because The right brain, I mean, it's like you're going to feel it, right? You feel it. You're in your body. The right brain is more of this relationship, not with a cognition of an idea that is external to me that I can theorize on and I can drill down to a detail. It's the consciousness of my body. How do I get into my body? And for me, it becomes so apparent when I'm in my left brain and I'm more stiff, I'm more rigid, I'm more intellectual. I'm this much, my body is designed to move my head around. And that's a completely different experiential than when I'm in the consciousness of my body and I'm more fluid and I'm open and I'm engaged. Really getting to know the different parts of who we are. Music is a great one. And why? It's in the body. The learning of the music, the language of music, the notes, and drilling that's going to be a great left brain thing if we're that kind of an artist. Or we may not be able to read music at all. We just pick up an instrument and we start creating sound, and then we add rhythm to the sound, and then it builds, and we're having this right brain experience. So music is a powerful tool to be able to differentiate different pieces of music. Anyway, yeah, no, I love that. And then the movement of the body, and just different ways of engaging, even in language, the metaphor, which you also hit on, the metaphor of in order to make a metaphor, you have to get out of just the detail. And there's, anybody interested in the brain, there's just so many really beautiful, interesting, fascinating ways of approaching themselves and thinking about themselves, but really coming in with a curiosity, I think is number one. And the reason why the right brain is creative is it doesn't have that judgment. It doesn't have the judgment of what's right, wrong, good, bad. And the left brain coming in and saying, okay, well, Jill, if you're going to draw trees, the leaves have to be, a normal color. You can't have them be blue. And it's like, well, I might want blue because I've got these gorgeous blues, and let's explore that possibility. And it's like, wow, then what would my right brain come up with in a creative, open possibility without that basic structure and right, wrong, good, bad judgment of the left hemisphere? And then the concern that, oh my gosh, I got to fit inside of the box, or those people out there, they're going to judge me negatively and I'm going to get a bad grade. And it's like, yeah. It's a beautiful thing.
I have students, and sometimes they'll write poems, and this happened with me too for a long time. You write a poem and really it's like, maybe character 3 writes the poem, and then the next morning character 1 comes back and says, oh, that's terrible. That's, and then you feel like, because it's the judgment. But
exactly right.
You can't.
I tell you that I did exactly that when I was in college. I was in creative writing, and I thought creative writing really meant creative writing. So boy, was I creative, and then I get these C's and D's on my poems, and I'm thinking, why?
Yeah.
Why? And it was clear that no, they weren't going for my character 3.
I
wanted my character 1 to write that poem. They should have told me so.
Yeah, that's a great point. They want you to be creative, but they want you to use character 1 to be creative, but character 1 isn't the creative part.
Exactly. So how many of us go in as truly creative, and then we get judged by a negative character 1 because we didn't follow the semantic structure correctly or whatever. And so we get graded poorly on our creativity. And so we withdraw even more from valuing that right brain. I mean, we do not exist in a society that, yes, we want our kids to be creative. We want them to be analytical, You know, we want them to be athletic so that they're in their body and they can create health. But there's still this pretty small box over here of a character one that we define as what is right and what is wrong. And, you know, so where do we go? And I think that that's when we really go into whole brain living. I think getting to know, I'm not going to reject my character one. It's a fantastic part of who I am, but I don't live my life based on the values of my character one. And the value is me, mine. I want more. I want bigger. I want whatever. I want what I want. And in spite of what you want, which is pretty much how we've been brought up in our society. And what I find is that if I bring that, I have that, I'm good at that, I can do that. I'm not just this. I'm not just creative and open and expansive and possible. I'm both. And to me, that was the whole point of whole brain living. If I am all of it, and I respect it. I gave a Zoom conversation with a group of fourth graders the other day. And I said to the fourth graders, do you know your mother's, we'd already gone through the four characters, but do you know your mother's character one? And they were going, oh yeah. I said, somebody give me an example of a mom's, when your mom's a character one. Oh yeah, she comes in and she wants me to clean up my room. And I said, okay, well, what do you do? Do you go clean up your room? And they said, yes, I go clean up my room. And I said, okay, and then what happens? Well, then I get distracted. And then what happens? Well, then I go and I play with something. And then what happens? Well, mom comes back. And how's mom? Mom's a 2. I said, okay, so your mother comes in as a kind character one and says, I need you to clean up your room. And so you say, okay, mom, I'm going to go clean up my room. And as your character one, you go and you start to clean up your room. And then you get distracted and you become a character 3, right? And you start playing. And so your mom, how does your mom feel? Well, mom, she's not happy. And it's like, so what does she do? She comes in and she yells at me. And I'm going, okay, so she becomes her character 2. Why did she become her character 2? Because I didn't clean up my room. Did you have the power to prevent your mother from becoming a character 2? Did you have the power to actually try to stay a character 1, clean up your room, and then go play? And it's like, oh, well, I guess I did. And isn't this the dance that we're constantly doing with one another? You know, most character ones, we all have all 4 characters. But if mom comes in as a character 1, or a teacher comes in and says, this is what I need from you, give them what they need, and then add the spice on top. It's kind of like cooking. You got to get the recipe right. And so paying attention to, what does my teacher need? My teacher needs me to perform this character 1 details. Here's the task. So do the task, but add to the task the character 3 and 4 creative, open, genius, because there's no genius in character 1. Character 1 is a it's a laborer. So do the labor, but add the genius of you to the labor. And that's why for me it's really whole brain living. And by understanding the anatomy of choice and the 4 characters that stem from that anatomy, to me, that's personal freedom. And then we truly do have free will, because then it's not like I only have one choice. It's like, I know what my characters 1, 2, 3, and 4 would choose. Well, what outcome do I want? And then I can choose the outcome based on the value structure of each of those 4 characters.
Yeah, it's kind of like giving yourself a neuro democracy where, for such a long time, the right brain didn't get a vote. And now, like, if we can actually give each character a vote, and then depending on the situation, they can all vote, and whatever's the most useful at the time, maybe character 3 would vote for, if it was really practical, it might say, okay, let's let character 1 take this. I've learned a long time ago. I was, my daughter was practicing for a spelling bee, and my character 3 is pretty dominant. And so we're helping her with spelling. And I forget what the word was, but I told my wife, I said, you could spell a word a lot of different ways. that was my character 3.
Yeah.
And my character 1 came out and said, no, there's only one way to spell a word. And I remember that. It was like, so character 3 really should have gave in at that moment. And it has. It's like, so when it comes to spelling and grammar, character 3 is not like, it's learned, it gets its vote, but it's more cooperative now. And it says, you know what, I'm going to let you take this one, because the truth is, I'll make up my own words and I'll make up my own way of spelling. And the rest of the world doesn't really get that very well.
Yeah.
And so, I think the neural democracy is I think that's what sort of captured like the phrase whole brain living. It's like you're giving every part of your brain a chance to express its value. And then it recognizes, like once it gets to vote and it knows it's valued, it's not going to necessarily be dominant all the time. It's going to come out at the right times.
Right. Exactly. And that's why, to me, practicing and getting to know each of these 4 characters inside of yourself. And that's why the book really is a workbook, because if you don't get to know each of your 4 characters, then you don't have the power to choose them or to interact or watch the interactions between these different parts of your brain. And once you really get to know these 4 characters, then it's like, oh yeah, here's a great story. So a friend of mine, she is actually the school teacher, who I was talking about. And she's a strong 1. She's a powerful character 1, and she's fantastic. She creates order everywhere. She organizes her classroom on Zoom and in the room. She knows where she is on the hierarchy with the principal and the superintendent of the system. She knows how to manage all these parents with all this pandemic going on. She creates order. She's fantastic character 1. Well, her husband he is a strong 1, but he's really a character 3. So sounding familiar, isn't it? So he's a strong character 3. And so she's coming home and he is ready. He loves to cook. They love to play tennis together. He thinks she's coming home and they're going to do some tennis and then they're going to do dinner together and everything's going to be great. So he's really happy and he's excited she's coming home. And so she can now call him up and say, honey, I'm coming home, but I need 20 minutes of you being a character 1. Yeah. And if you do that with me, then we can fix this. And then I'm all yours the rest of the evening as a character 3. And he's going, great. I'm more than happy to help you for 20 minutes as a character 1. And then I get the whole evening as a 3. And so that's a very different communication than she comes home as a 1. He's ready to be a 3. She says, no, I can't go play. I need you to do this with me. And he's going, now, I don't want to do that. You said we can go play. So now he becomes a 2. And then she comes in and says, look, all I need is, and so she becomes a 2. And now they have this 2 for 2 tit for tat, which never has a positive resolution. And what could have been a simple communication has turned into a tit for tat, which is hostility. And now people's feelings are hurt and they're not happy. So the beauty of knowing your own 4 is being able to show up for the 4 of those you're in relationship with, so that you can actually navigate relationships better and not just have peace inside of your own head, but have peace in your relationships. And oh my gosh, what a difference it makes when we start realizing, okay, I'm a whole human being with all these different parts. I can now identify my parts. I can identify these parts in everybody I love, and I can communicate better so that feelings don't get hurt and we don't get hooked into that pain and that hostility and that aggression among us.
Yeah, it's a wonderful kind of expression of how when we know what's going on inside, things work out much better on the outside.
Yeah. And I'll bet now that you've read Whole Brain Living, you're looking at your own relationships with your spouse and your children differently.
Oh, it's, my character 3 really believes that everything belongs the last place you put it. And my wife's character 1 realizes that,
exactly,
and that things need to be put away. And so, one of the things that I realized is like, so I have the house to myself today, and so I'm gonna let character 3 go crazy, and everything could be put wherever it belongs, which is the last place you left it. But when she gets back, I'm okay. I'm gonna crank up character 1. I'm gonna put things back where they think, people think they should be, and that really does make things, it really it sets the emotional tone. And I think people appreciate that you're willing to, have that kind of democracy upstairs, and take a vote on certain issues, and be flexible, and be open, and that has to do with the multiplicity of selves. And so, if I get too caught up in character 3 and I think that's who I really am, that could be a disaster. The relationship would go bad very quickly. But because I have a little bit of more flexibility, it's like, okay, no, I could turn my character 1 on. And what I really like getting at the consciousness, like, what is it that's making the choice of these different, like when you do the brain huddle and you say, okay, first take a breath, and then you recognize which character is really coming out, so you got all 4 characters. Like, what's making the observation? What is the awareness of the characters?
I still think it's character 4. I get asked that a lot. Who's the observer? I think character 4 is the consciousness that is just always observing everything. It's it's just the presence of being there. And it's the presence of being there without a judgment. Character 4 doesn't come in and say, this is right, or this is wrong, or this is good, or this is bad. It's just like, it is what it is. And it's the blue sky that is always the blue sky, regardless of the clouds or whatever the weather blows in as a character 1, 2, or 3, because characters 1, 2, and 3 are action. When I experienced that stroke, I was all but dead. I passed out moments before I landed in Mass General Hospital's emergency room. As soon as I got in there, they started poking and prodding, and so I felt my spirit surrender. It's the only language I could use to help people understand where was I. It had been hold on. What was I holding on to? I had no idea what I was holding on to. Life. I was holding on to my life. And I thought, if I calm everything, quiet everything enough, then I would at least stay in my body. And I wanted to stay in the body. I wanted to stay alive. And then I pass out right before I get to the emergency room. I felt my spirit surrender. That's the only language I can use. And I said goodbye to my life. Literally, I had hung on for 4 hours during this hemorrhage, and I dissipated. So for me, that consciousness is big as the universe. It's a big energy ball. It still surrounded me. My cells were still alive, but I had no consciousness of a functional brain going on. But once they stabilized my body and I woke up later that afternoon, there was a tiny little glee inside of me. I survived. I didn't hear the words, but I felt the spirit. I survived. And that would be for me the impetus, the energetic possibility of character 3, the action of experiential. So I shifted from that overall consciousness of total one with all that is, and into that impetus of possibility again. And so to me, the action are characters 3, 2, and 1, and that observing, all awareness, all knowing, not connected to all the details of my life because they were gone. You got to have that consciousness. You got to have those cells to know who you are. You got to have those cells to know who you're married to. You got to have those cells to know anything. And I didn't have those cells anymore. So for me, that consciousness of the observer, for me, I truly believe it's character 4. Now, when I die, I'll probably have a different opinion. But right now, I did not die. And under my circumstance, I'm going to say the observer is that character 4.
I think that's such a simple Buddhist practice is to become the observer of your thinking. And so in that way, it's almost like shifting over to character 4, being the observer of character 1 or the observer of character 2.
Yeah.
So that, it's such a powerful practice. And it's one of those things that can make all the difference in a person's life, between being caught up in character 1 or being the observer of character 1 and letting it do its thing and using it as a tool that is
celebrating it, being grateful for it. Thank goodness we have a character 1.
Yeah. And so I, like in my book, I talk about thinking so much, and sometimes people will comment almost as if I just want to end thinking altogether. And I'm like, no, it's a great tool. It just needs to be, you don't want to think when you're playing music. You don't want to think like the character 1 type of thinking. You don't want to do that when you're playing music. And that's one of the things that caught me as a musician. I realized that there's 2 ways I was playing music. One was character 1 was playing the music, and that's a terrible way to play music. Yeah. You're trying to get better. You're trying to.
You're robotic.
Yeah.
You're training.
There's no flow. There's no magic. There's no mystery. And then my character 3 is a much better musician. So when I get the guitar out, character 3 comes out. But when I'm writing like a memo for work, character 3 goes away. I can't do character 3 because other people won't find that humorous, I don't think.
Well, but and you can tell people who are left brain musicians, they are point perfect. They can do every detail, but it doesn't move you. The music, there isn't a lilt, there isn't a magic, there isn't that flow of soulness that goes with all those points of detail. So, which is one reason why music is so good for children or for anybody's brain, is because you train and you practice doing those details, more details about those details, repetition, get it over and over so that you're training the circuitry. But when it comes to a performance is not the same as a practice session. You don't practice and then get on stage and do what you've practiced. You practice to instill it in your fingers and get the whole thing, and then you go and then you perform it. And everybody complains, not everybody, so many complain about stage fright. But the beauty of stage fright is that stage fright is like this divorce. As long as you can manage and recognize stage fright is a positive thing. It's an energy, it's a freedom, it's a release of just the facts and the details. But that's why you have to know the facts and the details and have it so well ingrained inside of your body, so that when it comes time to just relax in the present moment and bring all that you have learned to right here, right now, that's when the expression of self comes fluid. So it's very easy to tell the difference, and it's a tough decision for kids because if you're brought up in a society or in a family that says everything has to be point perfect, then and that's where the energetic goes, then what is the difference between you and a robot performing the same thing as compared to practice it, get it in your fingers, and then express it as a piece of yourself. And it's easier to train people as character left brain, which is why school is all about facts, details, learn them, regurgitate them. But that's not true learning. And in order to truly learn, you have to be able to extrapolate, take the details, but it's not the details that's what's important. It's how you extrapolate what you have learned from different pieces of a puzzle in order to create a new solution to a new kind of problem, where you can take part of your mechanics, part of your electronics, part of your history, part of your this, and put it all together in a new way when you need to come up with something new.
Wow. It feels like we could just talk and talk. We have so much ground to cover, but I was thinking maybe we could do this again, and
I'd love to.
might even be fun to get Ian, get a nice character one on board, and it'd be a wonderful discussion to, because again, I think we're absolutely on the same page of getting the word out that there's this amazing, incredible, mystical, beautiful place that if we just tune into it, just it's there already, and it's like music's playing, we're not listening to it.
Yes.
And it's there, and if we just become a little bit, it's a tiny little movement, and you just kind of like adjust the dial just a little bit, and all of a sudden even suffering can take on a kind of a interesting quality. And so it's a reframing, and I think that it's a time for a paradigm shift. I think the time is right, and you know, I would really enjoy being part of that mission, because you know, I think that these states that underlie right brain awareness are they're there already, and we just tune into them, and life changes in literally a beautiful way that goes from suffering without meaning to meaning with occasional suffering, which is fine, and it's part of our human experience.
I celebrate my suffering now, you know, because it's like what you said about sound. You know, you have to have the silence. So when I think about you know, the sound, the music, the power of music is not just in the notes, it's in the space, the silence between those notes. And so I know that a lot of meditation and tools are focused on the space between the thoughts. And what is, how do I grow that space between what I'm thinking? And if my goal during a meditation is to silence my mind, well, that's never my goal. That happens automatically when I stop thinking and focusing on those thoughts. They become more of a background. What do I bring to the front? And if I bring the song of the bugs to the front, and if I bring the vision of the water and the surface of the water, or to the dust particles in the air, if I bring my mind to first the present, and then I bring my mind to the focus of these other things, then it's all circuitry inside of the brain. So if I'm given the microphone to those thoughts and what I'm thinking in language, again, I'm thinking, but I'm thinking in the present, and I'm thinking about what is here in the present, so that all of that monkey mind, as they call it, goes to the back. The language goes to the back, and it's kind of like a child. You know, if you ignore a child long enough, it tends to stop talking so much.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of the same philosophy. It's like, if I'm not focused on what I'm thinking all the time in language, then I can observe myself thinking in my body. When I'm playing my music, I'm in my body, I'm thinking in my body. I'm having different experiences, and those are actually different circuits in our brain, and we can train ourselves away from the noise, and part of the noise is that circuitry of our pain.
And once that gets turned down, it seems like a playful, it's just a certain type of play comes in, like, you know, it all becomes like a game. And I love some stories of the East that talk about our whole existence is like a drama. Like it's all just it's a game that we're playing, and you really get that feeling. And so I think we're off to a great start. I mean, I think the paradigm is right for a shift. I think it's a feeling. It just feels like things are happening. And so I mean, that would be wonderful. Maybe we could have another discussion, and we can.
I would love that. And actually, I think that one of the things that attracts me to you so much as a comrade on this journey is you're educated in the Eastern philosophies. And I've never been trained. I mean, I've of course read, and I'm familiar with techniques, and you know, I've been interested my whole life, but I've never studied it. And so maybe a really interesting conversation might be between what some of these concepts are from Eastern thought pattern, and how, based on my experience as a brain scientist and this experience with stroke and the way that I think about it, we could verbalize it together. Do you understand what I'm suggesting?
I think it would come so naturally to you that you would just sort of like be nodding and like, it might be new names and things.
Right.
But I think you would.
I think that would be a very, because nobody's done that conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that would be make for a fascinating conversation.
That would be great. I would love to, get into Advaita Vedanta, get into some Zen, some Buddhism, Taoism, and it comes back to, in a lot of ways, it's this conversation we just had.
Yes.
Be a different nuance to it. It would be a slightly different center to it, and I think it would be interesting to a lot of listeners if we just put.
I think it would be very satisfying for a bunch of people's character one. Like, these people, they're all over the place. Okay, that was for conversation number one. The conversation number two, we'll do it for their one. It's kind of like marry brain science, cognitive neuroscience, and Eastern philosophy.
Yeah, it'd be wonderful.
All right, I'm in. I'm game. Thank you, Chris.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm so grateful, and I look forward to our next conversation. So we will schedule that.
Okay. Thanks.
All right.
So thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.